Hello, I'm Olivia Mattis. I'm delighted you've joined us here today. I'd like to welcome you on behalf of the Sousa Mendes Foundation, as well as on behalf of our guest organization featured in today's program called Artists for Israel. We have their CEO, who will be formally introduced in a minute. I am, in fact, one of the speakers today, which is kind of unusual, but I wanted to do this, and I invited my colleague and friend Mariana Bratis on the board of directors, who's been an activist in the Sousa Mendes cause for many years, 35 years, to be today's moderator. So Mariana, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Olivia. And thank you for all for coming. And I welcome you to this great story. I'm coming to you from Beijos, which is the original Sousa Mendes family village, where Aristides and Angelina's grandparents lived and raised their family. I'm very pleased to see so many people interested in learning more about our hero, Aristides de Sousa Mendes, and we also today we will also learn about new ways to honor him. And and that the rescuers literally on the street in the impressive murals that we will hear about today. First, let me introduce our speakers. Starting with Craig, who is the CEO of Artists for Israel, and Craig Dershowitz is the founder of this Righteous Mural Project, and he works. He started with Aristides de Sousa Mendes, which we think is a great place to start. And he has worked with over 2,000 artists representing more than 32 countries and using art as a tool for social change. They're celebrating their 13th birthday, so we'll hear about the big party later, no doubt. Then I would like to introduce Silvério de Sousa Mendes, who's the great-grandson of Aristides and Angelina, and he's also the president of the General Council of the Fundação Aristides de Sousa Mendes, in Portugal. And he is a family representative who received the honors at the Pantheon in the ceremony a year ago. And so he has a master's degree and an MBA from Coimbra University, and he works in the health field. And then, of course, we have our own Olivia Mattis. Dr. Mattis is president and co-founder of the Sousa Mendes Foundation, and she is an award-winning musicologist and author with a PhD from Stanford University and a BA from Yale University. She's actually also now a certified museologist, and she has worked on this great story for many years. I certify her. And 12 members of her paternal family, were rescued by Aristides de Sousa Mendes as they escaped from Belgium in 1940. So we have our guests will be sharing their stories. And before we start to hear from them, we will we'll see a short clip about the Righteous Murals Project. And before we start, I want to thank Craig Dershowitz for including a clip from my very good friend, Esther Dresner, who was so good to me in Princeton. Thank you.
When Jewish centers are targeted from Mumbai to Overland Park, Kansas, when swastikas appear on college campuses, when we see all that and more, we must not be silent.
Now, in these times worldwide, when humanity is buffeted by crisis after crisis, when the need for redemptive action has never been more urgent, I was very eager to join you here in Washington to commemorate the righteous among the nations.
The Righteous Among the Nations is a list of non-Jews who stood up against anti-Semitism, often at their own risk, to protect Jews and to help them escape Nazi Germany and the Nazi-occupied countries. Artists for Israel's Righteous Among the Nations global mural project empowers the world's greatest artists to take the heroism of those who stood up against anti-Semitism during the Holocaust and to celebrate those heroes and bring it back to the public's attention. And we're giving the heroes the respect that they're due. We're putting them front and center in the middle of the most populous cities and across the world.
Percebo que o poder que nós temos de estar na rua, não é? Num sítio público, podes comunicar coisas importantes. A mensagem que tu passas é importante a partir do momento em que tu vais chegar a todos os estratos sociais, a todas as idades, a todas as raças e tu vais mexer com essas pessoas e, portanto, o poder de tu estás na rua é enorme, não é?
We have a number of artists that we're going to be reaching out to for this project. The first mural has already been done by Mr. Dio. Mr. Dio is one of, if not the most famous and talented Portuguese artist. He and I had spoken about it. We looked into it. We found this incredible gentleman, Aristides de Sousa Mendes from Portugal.
Quite frankly, I didn't know much about him before. And I remember as soon as I spoke with my father about this project, straight away he mentioned Sousa Mendes as an hero. And it was a real pleasure to know his story and to know what a hero he was.
Sousa Mendes saved 30,000 lives, 10,000 of them Jewish.
This man really was a hero.
This man saved my life.
Sousa Mendes was a consul general of Portugal. He defied the orders of dictator Salazar by signing visas and transporting thousands of desperate refugees across the French-Spanish border into Portugal.
You had to have a passport to have a visa. In our case, when we left, my parents didn't take their passport along. So he issued visas on just a slip of paper.
3 generations of my family were enabled to practice architecture by Aristides de Sousa Mendes.
My 2 sons, my 2 granddaughters, multiply that by 30,000, and you have an idea of how many lives Sousa Mendes is actually responsible for.
He sacrificed his own career, his reputation, even put the security of his family at risk just to save the lives of strangers.
He didn't care about himself. He had 13 children at home. He was a nobleman with a beautiful big house. He lost everything.
Mendes was found guilty of defying his government. He was stripped of his position, and he died a poor man.
It is something that must always be remembered, that there are people, and I feel emotional, who do not care what the price is to do the right thing, and they do it. And I think they need to be remembered forever and to be honored.
Para evitarmos novos holocaustos, nós necessitamos de relembrar, de ensinar as nossas maiores referências.
This is the new way of Holocaust education and prevention. We're taking these stories out of the books, out of the museums, and we're bringing them into bright, shining light. One of the next artists that we'll be working with is Juri, an artist from Japan. We're also going to be working with Taker One, a phenomenal graffiti artist out of Hungary. We'll be working with the artist and the fine gentleman, Cedric Douglas Vise One from Boston, to paint an American righteous among the nations. We're looking forward to working with members of Innerfields in Germany. This is a select group of the world's most talented and most loving artists to take part in this first round. And then after that, we're going to a second round with all new artists from all new countries around the world. The impact of these artists that we work with can grow exponentially. They themselves have hundreds of thousands, if not millions of followers independently, and it just makes the round shared and shared and shared. And so we're talking about millions of eyes on the story of those who stood up against anti-Semitism.
And I think it's really important, and I feel proud that I did this to keep the memory alive. My expectations is, the young kids that will pass by and ask their mom or their dad or their grandparents, they will also learn.
We are creating a model for behavior for those fighting injustice and a path for people to walk forward and continue to be heroes.
You're there when I'm down, so I'm staying here. I
Thank you, everybody, for coming. I can't see if everyone liked the clip, so if you did, please put in the chat that you enjoyed the film. I really hope you did. I'm not the filmmaker, but I'm responsible for the art, and so it means so much to me. And it means so much to me to be welcomed into the family here in Portugal, to have the support of his family, of Sousa Mendes's community, and even more than that, his country. The work that we're doing is very much focused on making sure that we're speaking to the fellow countrymen of these heroes. And so to be welcomed here today and get to present to you, I really appreciate it. As was mentioned, we have 13 years that the organization Artists for Israel has been working on these projects. And in fact, we have our gala tomorrow. We're actually calling it our B'nai Mitzvah Gala, because we're going to be celebrating 13 years of how we've moved from being, in the beginning, upstarts, to now being what we'd like to consider outstanders, from going from an organization that refused to follow the other organizations in the space to being an organization that now leads others. And the way we've done that is through really focusing on a couple of key matters. First is art. There is nothing more powerful in my estimation, and we've seen proven in our work, than the ability to communicate using creativity and using visual and other media that allows us to speak from the emotion and not from a place of facts and figures that's so often lost in today's fast-paced environment. The other thing is we're an organization that focuses on seeking and promoting and elevating the positive, of creating beauty, and of doing that in even the most difficult circumstances and settings. And of course, there's no one more difficult than when we are discussing the Shoah. And I want to move into the Shoah. So after 12 years of us working in the pro-Israel space, an organization called Artists for Israel, we were wrestling with the same thing everyone else was wrestling with, right? Holocaust education or Holocaust awareness was down, anti-Semitism was up, and both of those trends were, moving at a precipitous pace in those horrible directions. And so it was brought to us again, okay, Artists for Israel, you like to do things differently. Here's a new challenge for you to undertake. Help us in this space. And we thought about it, and we wrestled with it, and there were no new ideas, right? What could anyone do? And what we decided was we have to lead again from a place of positivity, a place of strength, a place of celebrating art and beauty and heroism. And that's where we came to the Righteous Among the Nations Global Mural Project. There were a couple key ideas that are there, and I hope you don't mind if I share them with you. The first is that everything was being done from a place of shame and blame. We were saying to a generation that's now 2 or 3 generations removed from the Shoah, look at anti-Semitism, the Holocaust can happen again. And what we noticed from the artists that had worked with Artists for Israel, they were feeling quite upset about this. They would say to me, why is your community pointing the finger at me? I had nothing to do with the Holocaust. I have nothing against the Jewish people. In fact, I love and support you. I was talking to the artists that had come to Israel with us to paint bomb shelters and do charitable and humanitarian aid projects. And they said, I'm starting to feel offended. I'm literally starting to feel hurt. And I said, wait, we're creating a new generation of people that are angry at the Jewish people because they feel personally attacked and threatened. So we knew we had to stop that. And we realized that we had partners. We had people that had been supporting Israel, that had been supporting the Jewish people for so long. And even in the worst times, even in the darkest hours, we had heroes like Sousa Mendes. And so instead of shame and blame, we wanted to uplift. We also knew the best way to do that was to celebrate those people out loud. And not just to others who cared about the Holocaust, but to do that in a way that everyone was aware. I said to myself, I went to a park in my neighborhood. I live very close to the Holocaust Museum in Los Angeles, and nothing against it. It's a beautiful venue, but there's a number of barriers to entry when you're talking about Holocaust education, and particularly going into the museums, right? You have to want to go, which means you have to already have a knowledge about what it is you're doing. You have to pay potentially the fee to go. You have to get there. You have to spend the time. So we realized not enough people were going into museums. And we also realized that not enough people were reading the books, the textbooks. There's nothing very sexy about Holocaust education. And, we live in a time where people aren't taking the opportunity to get in depth. So we said, we are going to move Holocaust education to the streets. We are going to put it literally in the center of a busy town, or in the case of Porto, on the street that apparently goes between Porto and Gaia. And we're going to make people have to interact with it and see it. And once they do that, the awareness is going to spread. And we are going to do that, here's the key, by celebrating people and creating what we call modeling heroism to end anti-Semitism. Saying, here is a social contract that your fellow countrymen signed to help, to benefit others. And you too can do the same thing. So not only do you have a hero to look up to in a time of crisis, you have a need to do it, because that is what the Portuguese do. That is what the heroes do. They stand up, and we want you to do the same thing. So the first project is the Sousa Mendes, as we discussed. And here's how it happened. I reached out to the thousands of artists that Artists for Israel had worked with, and I said to them, hey, here's this project idea we have. Who wants to be involved? Who wants to do it? They all said, I had a number of people, I want to do it, I want to do it, right? It's a beautiful idea. I said, great. Call me back and tell me the hero that you want to memorialize. And as you saw in the video, Mr. Dio, and I would suggest seeing his work, you can't miss it, it's all over all of Portugal, came back to me and told that story about talking to his father. And what he didn't mention in the video, because of his own modesty, is that he and his father did not or do not have a great relationship. And this was the first time they'd really had a deep conversation in quite some time. And he saw in his father the very things I was talking about, which is that patriotism. Here's a generation that loved this man, that held him up to great esteem as a hero, and his own child didn't know about it. And it was because of us, thankfully, that we were able to do that and bring him into the forefront. And we were so honored to do that. We have a number of projects coming up. You saw a few that were in the video. I'll tell you, we're working on 2 individuals in the States, 2 people who I think are very well known by the Sousa Mendes Foundation. One is Master Sergeant Roddy Edmonds, and the other is Irina Opdyke. Now, there's nothing I can tell you about these individuals that you haven't already seen in a Sousa Mendes presentation. And if you haven't, please do, because they did a wonderful job of sharing their stories. And Artists for Israel is going to continue to grow this project. And our goal is to create an international global network of heroes that we can look up to, that we must see in the streets around us, and create a dialogue for Holocaust education and anti-Semitism prevention that is stronger and deeper and more visual than any of the hate that's out there. And I thank you for allowing me to share this information with you. And I'm now going to pass the virtual floor to Olivia and let her share. And I look forward to your presentation as well. It's great to be getting educated about such an important topic. So thank you so much.
And thank you, Craig. Boy, it's very exciting what you're doing. And thank you for doing it.
Of course.
So you all saw a film, the film Disobedience. That's not really what our hour is about today. We're telling you about other aspects of the Sousa Mendes story and how he's been honored, and the reality behind the story in the film. So we're not directly addressing the film, but if you do have questions about the film, we are more than happy to answer them. And Mariana will be collecting your questions while we continue to present. So Silvério de Sousa Mendes and I are in fact going to give a joint presentation. We're going to tell the story of my family and of his, and how both of our families interacted with history. So Silvério, how are you?
Good afternoon, Olivia, and good afternoon also to all the audience. I would like to thank you very much for the invitation to be here, to be there with the Sousa Mendes Foundation. And thank you very much also, dear Olivia, for inviting me to be part of this session. I really appreciate, and all the family also really appreciate, the way you honor the memory of the Holocaust rescuer Aristides de Sousa Mendes. So thank you very much for your leadership. So, as Olivia also mentioned, my name is Silvério de Sousa Mendes. I'm great-grandson of Aristides de Sousa Mendes, and I'm grateful to be part of a big family. 82 years after the invasion of many European countries, here we are again in 2022 with the same episodes. At this specific time that we are talking, that we are listening, there are children, women, and men that are being killed, cities destroyed. And the example that we will be sharing today, it is an inspiration for the contemporary rescuers that are out there making the difference, helping refugees, not just only in Ukraine, but worldwide, not looking for religion, not looking for the color of the skin. And I'm absolutely sure that the writers among the nations of today will be not forgotten. Aristides de Sousa Mendes, that you will be seeing the picture in the coming slide, my great-grandfather. It was Consul General of Portugal in Bordeaux, in many other countries also, but this moment that we are talking today, it will be regarding Bordeaux in France. And he was considered the angel of Bordeaux. He delivered thousands of visas to allow to enter the safe haven, refused silence and indifference. He takes also major personal risks, as you also saw in the movie. He acted heroically to save others and sacrifice all that they had because Angelina also had, and they sacrifice all they had in order to save others. Aristides de Sousa Mendes is a Holocaust rescuer who issued Portuguese visas to fleeing refugees from 49 countries. Imagine, from 49 different countries in May-June of 1940. He defied his government in issuing the visas, and it was forbidden by a document called Circular 14. These visas provided an escape route that did not previously exist from France through Spain to Portugal.
Once in Portugal, the refugees were helped by Jewish agencies and others to find onward visas and ships to final destinations the world over. Sousa Mendes was punished by his government, but posthumously he was recognized as righteous among the nations by Yad Vashem in 1966. So now let's look at some key dates of World War II. So as you all know, World War II began on Friday, September 1st, 1939, with Germany invading Poland. But our story really begins with this next date of Friday, May 10th, 1940, the invasion of the Low Countries, meaning Belgium, the Netherlands, Luxembourg, and also the north of France. So that was the event that precipitated the flood of refugees on the roads of France. 6 to 10 million refugees were estimated to be on the roads of France in June of 1940. And of course, June 14th is the day that Paris fell and the Eiffel Tower had a swastika flying on top of it. Here we see a mother and child on the rubble of their house that has just been bombed in the outskirts of Paris at the end of May 1940. This is the moment they've gone from being peaceful citizens to refugees. The refugees were going south, inexorably south, and they were fleeing the Nazi advance, which was going from the north to the south. So the southern cities of France were inundated with these refugees, and those are the cities of Bordeaux, Bayonne, Toulouse, and Marseille. Here is the situation as it was in Bordeaux. This is not a photograph, it's an etching by a French artist named Charles Philippe. And you see refugees covering every square inch of the city. And this is the scene that Sousa Mendes would have been confronted with in June of 1940. Here is a map of Europe. The black arrows represent the Nazi advance as it was as of June 1940, and the orange arrows represent the escaping refugees. So here in this close-up, we see the centrality of Bordeaux to these refugees, those who are trying to get to Lisbon, which was an open port from where people could take a ship to the UK, to the United States, to South America, or to points in Africa and Asia.
Here in this photo on the right side, you can see António de Oliveira Salazar. He served as Prime Minister of Portugal, and it was 36 years of dictatorship between 1932 and 1968. He was born in a city very close to Cabanas de Viriato, because Cabanas de Viriato it was where Aristides born, as also Mariana also mentioned. And as you also see in the photo on the left side on the desk, you can also see that he was a big admirer of Mussolini, because you can also see on the left side the photo of Mussolini. And due to his vision, Portugal remained largely underdeveloped when compared to the rest of Europe. In the Second World War, Portugal was considered a neutral country, and Salazar used the censorship and the secret police to quell opposition. And how was the life in Portugal? The life in Portugal, you can see in this picture, there's the arm gesture that you already know what it means. The boys in one side, the girls on the other side. There were no mixed classes, there were no freedom of expression, and there was no right to free vote.
Neutral Portugal was in fact really a fascist state because Salazar was a secret, or maybe not so secret, Hitler sympathizer, and he supplied the Nazi army with goods for the war effort, such as leather boots and uniforms, foodstuffs such as bacon and sardines, and vital materials such as tungsten and tin. In exchange, the Nazi regime paid the Portuguese regime with vast quantities of gold. By war's end, Portugal had the largest gold reserves in Europe after Switzerland, 400 tons. This is gold that was plundered from countries conquered by Germany and from the gold fillings of Holocaust victims.
And as you already noticed in the movie, and here that we already mentioned, in 1939, November 11, it was issued the Circular 14. And with the Circular 14, consuls are forbidden from granting visas to displaced persons, to Russians or to Jews, unable to return to their countries of origin.
Here we see two heroes. On the right is Aristides de Sousa Mendes, and on the left is Rabbi Chaim Kruger, originally from Poland, but escaping from Brussels in 1940. And you saw in the film what a partnership they had, how Kruger really was the catalyst for Sousa Mendes's action. Kruger came to Sousa Mendes begging for a visa for himself and his family of 7. In the film, there are 2 family members missing. The family, in fact, was Kruger, his wife, and their 5 children, 4 daughters and a son. So they were a family of 7. Sousa Mendes agreed to help the Kruger family and to issue them a visa, which Kruger then heroically refused. He said, "It's not enough for you to help me. You have to help everyone, all of these refugees. Please save all of my brothers and sisters."
And on June 13 of 1940, Sousa Mendes wrote to his brother-in-law, Silvério from Bordeaux, a letter that mentioned that here the situation is horrible and I am in bed with severe nervous breakdown. With Reiber Kruger also sparks the reaction from Aristides when talking with him. Something that Rabbi Kruger also gave, something spiritual to Aristides. And after this moment, Aristides also, as you also saw in the movie, thought 2 days, and he declared to his family that I would rather stand with God against man than with man against God. Aristides Sousa Mendes was very Catholic, and he decided to issue visas to anyone who requested one, in violation of the orders he had received on the Circular 14. And he also ordered the consuls in Bayonne and Toulouse to issue them too.
So who are the people that he saved? Well, we'll give you 2 famous examples. So here's Hans and Margaret Ray, the authors of Curious George. They were German Jews escaping from Paris on a bicycle, a tandem bicycle, and they had the manuscript to the first Curious George book in the basket of the bicycle. which thanks to Sousa Mendes, they were then able to publish in New York in 1941. So one could say to all of you out there who have children and grandchildren, imagine there would be no Curious George without Aristides de Sousa Mendes. Salvador Dali, the great artist, his wife Gala was Russian. She had one of these Nansen passports. She was a stateless Russian-born person, and under the terms of Circular 14, she would not have been eligible to get a Portuguese visa. But thanks to Sousa Mendes defying Circular 14, the Dali couple were able to get to New York in 1940. Dali himself was, of course, a very modern artist, and the Nazis were against modern art. They called it degenerate art. They had lists of modern artists that they disapproved of. So one could say possibly that there might not be any paintings by Salvador Dali past 1940 without the action of Aristides de Sousa Mendes. Here's my own family. 12 people saved by this hero. The little boy on the right with the puppy dog is my father, who was 7 at the time.
And in this photo, we can see two beautiful in love cousins that married in 1908, because my great-grandfather and my great-grandmother were cousins between them. So these are my great-grandparents, Aristides and Angelina, and together they bring 14 lives, and together they save tons of lives. They were pregnant from 1909 to 1933, because they have 14 children. This photo was taken in 1917 in Zanzibar. It is a normal family portrait. My grandmother Clotilde, she's on the right side with bones, and she was the 4th child. Here on the coming photo, Aristides de Sousa Mendes was consul in many different countries than Bordeaux. In this photo was taken in 1929, and you can see on the left side my grandmother Clotilde with 16 years old, and on the right side you can also see my uncle Pedro Nuno, born in Coimbra in Portugal, that you already saw in the movie that we have the access also. 9 years after the previous photo, right now this photo, it is a colored photo to show you better how was the family, because it is important also to understand and also to feel. This photo was taken in 1938, and as you also see, it is a normal family, a normal person, happy with the family. And right now, I would invite you to see the contrast between this facial expression that you notice and right now, after his punishment. After his punishment, this photo was taken in 1940, and he was punished for saving lives in violation of the Circular 14. He was a refugee inside his country. And from his defense, he mentioned that it was indeed my aim to save all those people whose suffering was indescribable. When he saw again Rabbi Kruger in 1940 in Lisbon, he mentioned, "I could not have acted otherwise, and I therefore accept all that has befallen me with love."
Here is one of the very first recognitions. So this is a photo from 1967 taken in New York at the Israeli consulate. Now, Yad Vashem had recognized Sousa Mendes 1 year earlier in 66 as righteous among the nations. So this ceremony in 1967 was to commemorate that fact. And so in the center, you see Sousa Mendes' daughter, Joanna, holding the Yad Vashem medal and her husband holding the certificate. And in front, there are 3 of the grandchildren. So, including my good friend Aristides at the far left, named for his grandfather. Next.
And in Portugal, on the April 25, it is a national holiday that we celebrate also the Freedom Day, commemorates the revolution, marks the end of the dictatorship in Portugal, and it took some years to recognize Aristides de Sousa Mendes in Portugal. The honors started just only in 1986, and it was just only in 1988 that was formally integrated.
Here is a postage stamp, one of several issued to honor Sousa Mendes. This one was issued in 1998 by Israel, honoring the righteous diplomats. And so they picture 5 of the righteous diplomats, and Sousa Mendes is the second from the left. The Sousa Mendes Foundation was started in 2010, 12 years ago. And here on our annual report that you see pictured is a photo of Silvério's beautiful daughters, Carlota and Matilda de Sousa Mendes, holding the portrait of their great-great-grandfather. I love that photo. So, what did we used to do before the pandemic? And what will we do again once this pandemic is behind us, if it's ever behind us? Well, we've been interviewing survivors. We work with professional videographers and filmmakers to document their stories. We also have a vast library and archive on rescue and resistance during the Holocaust, and we receive researchers, journalists, filmmakers to our archive to research this history. We also have publications. This is a graphic novel that we produce. We have made editions in English and French. We're now making a German edition. The English edition is sold out, and we're going to soon have a second edition that will have educational materials in the back matter. And it's really quite a lovely book that was created by the most famous cartoonist in Portugal named José Rui. We also participate in exhibitions all over the world. The one you're looking at now was in Luxembourg. It closed right before the pandemic started. We currently have an exhibition up in Bordeaux, France. We have an exhibition that's about to open in Ulm, Germany. And that's one of the things that we do. But our signature project, aside from these now Sunday programs, is the trip that we organize. It's called Journey on the Road to Freedom. It's a 10-day pilgrimage starting in Bordeaux and ending in Lisbon, Portugal. We were supposed to do a trip in 2020 that was canceled because of the pandemic. And we're now in the planning stages of our next trip, which we are hoping will be in 2023 at the end of June and the first few days of July. And so there is a link that just went into the chat box from Valentin Hassler, who is our intern from Austria, for more information on the trip. So if you're interested in the trip, go to that page and see all the information. It's not time yet to sign up. We're not taking deposits, but please do fill out the form, and that way we'll know you're interested. And coming up, we have a very important event in Israel. November 8th will be the dedication of Aristides de Sousa Mendes Square. We have been working with the city of Jerusalem, so it's going to be the mayor, Moshe Leon is his name, inaugurating the square. We're also going to have the Portuguese ambassador to Israel and other dignitaries. So if you or a loved one will be in Israel, please let us know.
And here in this photo, on the left side, I am with a mask, with a COVID mask. And in this photo is Portugal paying tribute to Aristides de Sousa Mendes, inducting him into the National Pantheon in Lisbon. And it was 1 year ago, more or less, on October 19 of 2021. Here you can see on the right side, the President of the Portuguese Republic, Marcelo Rebelo de Sousa. At the photo is giving to me the family, to the family, the Portuguese flag. And in the photo, you can also see in the middle, the Prime Minister, António Costa. And this was a very important moment, because this moment is the recognition about the moral courage. It's the recognition about the contribute to perpetuating the memory and the example of the conduct of Aristides de Sousa Mendes. It is also a recognition about demonstrating the value of resistance to the unjust and inhuman decisions. I felt a huge emotion to representing the family in this moment. I remembered all those who already passed away come to my memory at that moment. This flag also represents the recognition of the thousands of lives saved by Aristides and Angelina. This inspires also the pursuit of the defense of the human rights today and tomorrow.
Great. So thanks for listening to our presentation, and thanks Silvério and Craig for presenting with me. So right now I'd like to invite the audience to continue putting their questions into the chat box. Mariana Abrantes will be collecting your questions and we'll be asking them when it's time for the Q&A. But right now I'm taking the floor back just briefly to tell you about upcoming programs. We have one more program this month of October. Then we have 3 programs in November and 1 in December. All great stuff, I think, but I'm going to focus on just one program, which is next week. Next week, we are featuring a unique story. It's a film called No Place on Earth, about the true story of Jewish families in Ukraine, 38 people in all, who hid in a cave during the Holocaust for 511 days, the longest period in human history that anyone has ever lived underground. It's an unbelievable story. And so I urge you to sign up. We're going to have the cave explorer who first discovered the signs of human life in that cave. He's going to be on our program. We're going to have a member of one of the families that was hidden in the cave. And we also have the filmmaker. So right now, let's see a trailer for the film called No Place on Earth.
I'm a New Yorker, but my passion is exploring caves. I was in Ukraine when I stumbled over some objects. Those objects were someone's life. Western Ukraine was one of the worst places for Jews during the war.
We were hiding and mother says, Nisso, we gotta find a place. We cannot live like this.
38 of us descended into the cave.
We got down and we started sliding in.
My God, I've got a playground here.
No human being had ever set foot there.
We came there almost without food.
A glass of water was for a family.
We were very hungry.
All of a sudden we hear shooting.
And my mother said to the kids, hide any place you can.
Everybody started to run in different directions. They took my mother away. I'll never see her again.
The Russians, the Germans, who knows what's outside. The villagers came with the shovels and they filled up the holes.
People are screaming, open up the exit, open up the exit, but they can't do it.
3 days and 3 nights, we were working, everybody.
And I look up and I see a star.
One day I come out, there is this.
And we were liberated. So everybody was crying.
They survived underground for over a year and a half.
I forgot that there was a sun.
Here I am! Bang!
I wanted to say thank you to the cave.
I felt like I'm going back in time.
We beat the odds.
The cave was fighting for me.
They didn't get us.
We didn't tell it to others because it was just too incredible.
Let's close all the lights for a minute. No, I feel good.
So please join us for that program and the programs to come. Mariana, please help us with the Q&A.
Thank you. thank you very much. And thank you for these lovely presentations. We do have quite a few questions, and I'm hoping that I can keep up with them, but keep them coming. We'll probably get a chance to see them. So we have a couple. I will start with a couple of questions for Silvério. One is to ask, to tell us more about the consequences suffered by the children of Aristides for his heroic efforts. And I'll tell you, and then I'll give already the second question, which is, did the Sousa Mendes family seek restitution from the Portuguese government after Salazar was removed from office? And since he basically got away without any punishment. Salazar got away without punishment. Silvério?
Thank you very much for these questions. I will be starting answering Claudine's questions regarding the consequences that suffered the family, and it was a huge consequences, because with 14 kids, with 14 children, the children need to be spread by the world. And right now I have cousins in United States, I have cousins in Canada, I have cousins in Germany, I have cousins in Belgium, in French. So it is huge, because the family needs to be splitted, because Sousa Mendes unfortunately did not face how to recover, because the government took everything that he had, because he cannot include be lower, because they also quit this possibility to be lower. So they cannot be consul, they cannot be lower also. So it was very, very, very hard. And it was also the sign also of this family destroyed. It was also the house that right now the Portuguese Foundation have in Cabanas de Viriato, that we are now recovering the house to be inside the museum, but the house was completely destroyed. And this is the best sign of what they made to the family and what was the impact in the family. And in the meantime, answering also the question from the previous one, that was from Ronda Schwartz, regarding the restitution from the Portuguese government. It was very hard, because in 1968, Yad Vashem recognized, after also in the United States, they also recognized how Aristides and Angelina were important in all of this episode. And just only in 1986, in Portugal, they start talking with about Aristides Sousa Mendes. And right now, no, just only in 1988 that he received the first integration in the career and apologized from the government. But it is not easy, because I also have cousins, I also have uncles that, for example, in the street, they cannot mention, in the past years, they cannot mention that they are descendants from Aristides Sousa Mendes. So it was a dark period from our family, but God, right now the family is also recovering, because right now they have a couple of recognitions all over the world, and this is very important, to have the rehabilitation on behalf of Aristides Sousa Mendes, because the only thing that he made, it was saving lives, and he was punished by saving lives. That was incredible.
Thank you. I think I can mention a couple of things, a couple of questions for Olivia. One question is about how to see the Disobedience film. Then questions about what happened to Rabbi Kruger's family, and another important question, two more, well, the questions are important, but two more general questions. One is, what is the age-appropriate time to teach people about the Holocaust in U.S. public schools? The Sousa Mendes Foundation as an important educational program. And then also, are there other righteous Portuguese who haven't yet been recognized as much as they deserve to be?
That's a lot of questions.
I know, but you're a big girl, so you'll handle it.
So the film, yes. So the link that you got to see the film, that link will stay up. So feel free to share it, and it's the link for the film. So that's number one. Age appropriate, the right age to start teaching about the Holocaust. I think that's an individual choice for families and school districts. Typically they say 10 or 11, I guess. You can teach some aspects of it earlier on, but that's the beauty of having a rescuer's story as the entry point to this very dark history. So the graphic novel that we produce is aimed at middle schoolers, I would say, and high schoolers. And it's a gentle way into a heavy history. What else did you ask?
The question about what happened to Rabbi Kruger.
So, well, they went to New York. They're a very Orthodox family. So he had 5 children. So 2 were in Brooklyn, 1 recently died. One of the daughters was in Strasbourg, France, or she still is, I guess she's living. And there were 2 in Jerusalem, one of whom is still living. And that's Rabbi Yaakov or Jacob Kruger, who is 91 years old. And it's unclear if he will be there when we're in Jerusalem in November, but we hope so.
Okay, and just one more question was about the other righteous Portuguese. You know all the names by heart?
So there are, I think, 3 other righteous Portuguese, right? 2 of them were basically associates of Raoul Wallenberg, operating in 1944 in Budapest at a time when the tides of war were changing, and so it looked like the Nazis were losing in 1944, as opposed to when Sousa Mendes did his action in 1940, it looked like the Nazis might possibly win. So you had the dictator in Portugal, Salazar, kind of hedging his bets. So he was siding with the Nazis in 1940, but then by the time of 1944, when it looked like the Allies might win, then Salazar wanted to be in the good graces of the Allies. So it's a totally different historical context, totally different stories, and I think not comparable.
Well, very well. I think if you don't mind, I'll go to Craig so that we hear more about his a brilliant new initiative, and then I do have one more question for Silvério, but or 2 more questions. But so Craig, the question is about the mural. You explained it a little bit about what comes first, the hero, the artist, the city, or the wall. There's a question about whether any city has turned you down.
So I want to thank you for that question, because it actually raises a really important point. The impetus for this project was us being turned down to do a different mural. And this is where all of the ideas kind of came together and coalesced. We wanted to do a mural of Hannah Shenish, who very briefly, I mean, one of the greatest people I've read about, who actually was a female partisan who was parachuted behind enemy lines, captured, tortured, and refused to give up any information about those that she was with, and passed away in that way after doing so much to hurt the Nazi cause. And also very famous, wrote some incredible music as well. So we're talking about just an amazingly heroic person. And we wanted to do a mural of her in her home country of Hungary. And we had everything. We had this massive wall in this incredible area that would have been just, we had an artist, we had everything. We had the sketch, it was beautiful. It was her with a picture of the Lion of Judah, and it was everything we wanted. And the building tenants turned down the mural because, as was said in the building meeting, which turned into this raucous free-for-all, enough about the Holocaust. We are sick of being reminded of the Holocaust. And that was echoed, and people, I mean, it almost came to blows. I was not there, but from what was reported to me, because they are sick of the Holocaust being forced down their throats, especially the older tenants of the building. They didn't want to be reminded of it. They said, we didn't do it. Why must you always on and on? And so we said to each other, wow, you're right. We're coming at this from the wrong angle. And that was actually the impetus for this project. The answer to the question directly is that no, we've never been turned down because of a political reason. which is what I assume the question was. There's been, oh, that's not, that building isn't zoned for that, or, we can't get permission of the building owners, or, something that would come up with any artistic project. But there's been no specific reaction against doing the murals this way, which I think tells a lot, because when we tried to talk about the horrors, we were rejected. When we try to talk about the positives and to create heroes within the community, we've been embraced. And that's been the difference between, where we started and where we are now. And I believe the other question is, what was the other question? Sorry.
Well, that was the main question. You already answered about where the righteous clip is, the mural clip is available. And there was one question that you also answered a little bit, but I'd like you to go a bit further, which is your idea of creating a network. Since there are already many streets with the Sousa Mendes names and a few other murals as well in many locations, when somebody said that they were in Porto and didn't see this because it wasn't yet on the tourist map. So could creating a network or some system to get this on the tourist map so that people actually go out of their way to see it?
So as we grow the projects, our website is putting everything together. We'll be creating an interactive map. As far as the tourist map, I want to work with you guys on how to do that. I will tell you that I've gotten pictures now of tour buses stopping there. So I don't know if there's an official tourist map or how each tour bus works, but it's now become, for at least 2 companies, from what I can tell, that do take people there as part of their stop as they tour around Porto and Gaia.
Okay. Thank you, Craig. We are, how are we doing for time, Olivia? Can we continue a bit? I have a couple of I have more questions.
I'll leave it up to you, Mariana.
All right. Well, we do have more questions, and I thank you everybody for that. But there's one question that I think I'd like to come back to, because it's really where Craig's clip started and Silvério's presentation started, which is what do you think we can do about the refugees today? And we hear, so I don't know if I can go to Silvério first, because I promised to come back to him. But what can we do to help refugees today?
Thank you very much, Mariana, and thank you very much also Leah Rosenfeld-Sils that also made this question. My point of view, I make a wrap up regarding the Craig's intervention and also our intervention, because the most important part, it's not talking regarding the Nobel Prize, not making the Nobel Prize and so on, but it is acting, and acting needs to be taking the story, the history outside of the books, taking the history outside of the museums, and involving also, as Leah also mentioned, involving the 3rd generation. Because we need to understand, we need to learn from the past in order to avoid war and in order to avoid misunderstood. So this is my opinion, that if there's Aristides de Sousa Mendes today, probably the world, it's not like this. But until this moment, when we are discussing Nobel Prizes, and if we are discussing if the government is correct or not, we are losing a little bit of time. The most important part is, as Craig also mentioned, it is take the history outside the museums and outside the books, because we need to learn by the history, but we need also to feel the history. And this is also my recommendation.
Okay. Craig, do you want to make a comment?
I just think I'd love to say, embrace your friends and allies now. There's an expression, at least in the hip hop community, maybe elsewhere, give people flowers while they can smell them. And just remember that we have a network, we have support, we're a global world now. And so let's not remember that just in our times of need, and let's stick close to those who we care about, because it's a lovely thing to do, and because we have to remember that as the Jewish people, or as people fighting for righteousness and justice, we're not alone.
Right. I think since we're running a bit over time, I will leave a few more questions pending, like how many families the foundation has been able to track to date. Perhaps Olivia can mention that in her closing thoughts. But I would like to mention a couple of things that I have one little thing that I'd like to share, which is a book that just came out, the Reader's Digest. The Reader's Digest was one of the first publications to publish a story of Sousa Mendes, and this is several decades later with a very interesting article in Portuguese, but I imagine you can find it in your own language. And so I will, there is one question here that I will ask Silvério also to mention, which is what is happening to his mansion and can it be visited? And so besides that, I would like to thank everyone for this very important session. The Disobedience film is always extraordinary. I'm very pleased to see Craig coming around and taking us on the street. We are so glad to be able to go on the street after 2 years of confinement. So we should all make a bucket list of places we'd like to visit, and including Gaia and other places. And so I will now ask you I'll start with Craig and then Silvério and then Olivia to give us our final thoughts.
Just want to thank everybody for being part of this. It means a lot to be welcomed into this and to see so many faces that I haven't seen before. And I see a lot of the people on this call are a little bit older than I am. And so just to know that generationally we're working together feels great. Thank you.
Silvério.
So thank you very much. I would like to thank you very much for your participation during this session. 144 people, it's not easy. And thank you very much for this tribute to a man who challenged the fascist ideology and who is an example in defending the values of freedom and human dignity. This session also gives to us and also to the world an opportunity to remember the memory of a Portuguese who preferred to be with God against man than with man against God. Aristides and Angelina, I'm absolutely sure that will be not disappearing from the history. And I would like also to share with you that here at my house, the new generation always re-mentioned to Aristides by my superhero. And this is true. Aristides and Angelina are superheroes. And I would like also to think together, we need to think also together about if Aristides have 1 more day, 2 more days, or 3 more days, how many people he could save around the world. But unfortunately, he just only have enough time to save the tons of people that he saved. But generation by generation, the numbers are increasing. So thank you very much. And for me, it was a big pleasure to be with you here and there.
So let's talk about numbers for a minute. The number 30,000 is often repeated. It's not really a number that we tend to use because, first of all, it's a very round number. So kind of by definition, it's false. We like to say thousands or tens of thousands. The Sousa Mendes Foundation has a research team. We had 11 members at one point, and we were trying to identify these families. So far, we have identified approximately 4,000 individuals by name who received visas from Sousa Mendes. So these 4,000 people, are they 10% of the total? Are they 50% of the total? We don't know exactly. We know that he saved in the thousands, and that's what we put on our website and in our literature. So I hope that answers your question. And of course, we're here to answer any more questions you may have. We're not going anywhere. So thanks, Mariana, for moderating. Thank you, Silvério and Craig. And thank you, of course, to our loyal and devoted audience. See you next week and the weeks to come. And have a nice rest of your day, everybody. Be well. Bye-bye.
Muito obrigada.
Obrigado.